The United States is supposed to be the richest country on Earth, so why does it feel like it's falling apart? Bridges collapsing, homeless camps under skyscrapers, and a generation drowning in debt while billionaires build rockets to space. Something's broken. On paper, the US economy looks powerful. GDP over $27 trillion, unemployment near record lows, stock markets at all-time highs. But beneath that glossy surface lies an uncomfortable truth. America's economic miracle is cracking. To understand why, we have to go back. After World War II, the US stood alone as the world's superpower. Factories were booming, suburbs were spreading, and the American dream wasn't just a slogan, it was real. From the late 1940s to the early 1970s, the middle class exploded. One income could buy a home, a car, a college education for your kids. It was an era of optimism. Then came the 1970s. Oil shocks, inflation, and the beginning of something Americans didn't see coming. The end of the golden age. Factories began to close. Production moved overseas, to Japan, to China, to wherever labor was cheaper. Corporate profits stayed high, but wages stopped growing. The wealth gap started to widen. And for the first time in modern history, Americans began to feel like the future might not be brighter than the past. Fast forward to the 1990s. Globalization and technology promised efficiency, and they delivered. Companies made record profits, but something else happened too. The US economy started to rely more on debt than on production. The manufacturing powerhouse became a consumption machine, and Americans became addicted to cheap goods, cheap credit, and the illusion of endless growth. Then came 2008. The financial crisis exposed what everyone ignored. The system was fragile. Banks too big to fail, a housing market built on lies, and trillions wiped out overnight. The government bailed out Wall Street and left Main Street to suffer. It was the moment millions realized the game might be rigged. Now jump to the 2010s, the recovery. Stock markets rebounded, corporations boomed, and CEOs made more than ever. But 80% of Americans saw no real income growth. Student debt passed $1.7 trillion. Healthcare costs exploded. Owning a home became a fantasy for millions. And the dream of upward mobility, the heart of America, started to fade. Then came Donald Trump. He promised to make America great again. And in some ways, the numbers looked good. Tax cuts fueled short-term growth, unemployment fell, and markets surged. But that growth was built on borrowed money. Federal debt skyrocketed. The trade war with China shook global supply chains. And while corporate profits hit new highs, wage inequality hit new records. Then the pandemic hit. Lockdowns froze the economy. The government printed trillions. Stimulus checks flowed. The stock market soared again, but so did inflation. In just 2 years, the cost of living exploded. Groceries, housing, energy, everything went up except for the average worker's purchasing power. Inflation was supposed to be temporary. It wasn't. What started as a short-term shock turned into a long-term squeeze. Even as prices stabilized, the damage was done. Wages lagged, savings disappeared, and millions turned to credit just to survive. Today, the average American household carries more than $100,000 in debt. And for the first time, younger generations are expected to be poorer than their parents. So where does that leave the US economy now? Right here. In a place where the numbers still look good, but the reality feels wrong. The top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. Corporate profits hit record highs while half of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And as of today, the US national debt stands at more than $35 trillion, growing by the second. That's not just a number, that's a future mortgage on every American's life. So what went wrong? Part of the answer lies in structure. America's economy was designed to grow forever, but infinite growth doesn't work on a finite planet. When consumption slows, the system shakes. When inflation rises, the system panics. When debt explodes, the system cracks. The US economy has become addicted to borrowing, to speculation, to printing money. Every crisis is solved by creating more debt. Every bubble is fixed by inflating another one. It's a cycle, one that can't continue forever. Economists call it financialization, when the real economy, the one that makes things, becomes overshadowed by the paper economy, the one that just moves money around. In the 1950s, only 3% of corporate profits came from the financial sector. Today, it's nearly 25%. Wall Street no longer serves Main Street. It is Main Street, and that's the problem. For decades, America outsourced production and imported cheap labor, cheap goods, and cheap energy. But now, global supply chains are breaking. Rival powers like China and India are rising, and the US is struggling to compete in the very industries it once created: semiconductors, rare earths, and manufacturing. At the same time, automation and AI are replacing jobs faster than new ones are created. In theory, technology should make life easier. In practice, it concentrates wealth in fewer hands. The people who own the machines own the future. And then there's politics. Washington isn't solving the problem, it's feeding it. Democrats and Republicans argue over culture wars while both approve trillion-dollar spending packages. The result? A government running on deficit autopilot. No matter who wins, the debt keeps growing. But there's another hidden factor: the dollar itself. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency, the foundation of global trade. That's given America unmatched power. But it's also created dependency. Because when the world stops believing in the dollar, the entire system, from Wall Street to your local grocery store, is at risk. And rivals like China, Russia, and even the BRICS nations are already trying to build a world beyond the dollar. If they succeed, the US could lose not just influence, but its greatest financial weapon. The biggest danger, though, isn't just economic, it's psychological. The loss of faith. When people stop believing that hard work leads to success, the social contract breaks, and that's when nations decline. That loss of faith shows up everywhere, in polarization, distrust, even declining birth rates. When hope disappears, ambition follows, and that might be the most dangerous trend of all. So what happens next? Some experts predict a soft landing, others warn of a new Great Depression. But most agree, something has to give. Maybe it's a debt crisis. Maybe it's a currency shock. Maybe it's the slow erosion of the middle class until there's nothing left to erode. Or maybe this is America's moment to reinvent itself. The US still leads in innovation. It has the most dynamic companies on earth. And if it can confront its debt, rebuild its infrastructure, and empower its workers, there's still hope. But hope isn't policy, and time is running out. So here's the real question. Can the richest nation in history fix itself before it collapses under its own weight? Because if it can't, then the American dream might become just that, a dream. What do you think? Is the US economy too far gone? Or can it still be saved? In the comments below. And if you want to uncover the untold stories behind money, power, and history, subscribe to Wealth Untold, because the next story might change the way you see the world.